Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Triple Ball Breakdown. So today's a very big day, and as you may see on the cover, I am ranking the 30 greatest NBA players of all time, and so it should be a lot of fun. And yeah, let's just jump right into it. So basically, the way this is going to work is I'm going to tell you the players 5 at a time, starting from 30. So I'll tell you the 30 greatest player, 29th, 28th, 27th, and 26th. I'll tell you why I put each player there, and then we'll move on to the next 5 until we get to the end. So, yeah, let's just start then. Okay. So, at number 30, I got Steve Nash. At number 29, I got Rick Barry. At number 28, I got Scottie Pippen. At number 27, I got John Stockton. And at number 26, I got Kawhi Leonard. So, I'll explain to you why I put each person, where I put them, why I don't think they should be higher or lower. And, yeah. So, I put Steve Nash at 30 because he won 2 MVPs in his career. He never won a ring, but he brought his team to deep into the playoffs many times. He could run a team that had a bunch of talent besides him. And yeah, a lot of people say he doesn't deserve those MVPs, and whether he does or does not, he definitely was one of the best players in the league for a while. And, I just think that he definitely deserves to be in the top 30. So, yeah, that's why I put him at 30. And then going down to Rick Barry, which is number 29, I put him there for just a few reasons. So I never watched footage of Rick Barry. You probably haven't either. But, gotta pay some respect to our elders. And he was like one of the best free throw shooters of all time. He shot his free throws underhand. So that's one of the reasons you put him there. He's one of the greatest Warriors players of all time. And so that's why you had to, include him in your top 30 players of all time. He's a big player in history, and you can't see a lot of things and just not mention him. He's on a lot of, if you actually look at a lot of records of top 20 of this and top 30 of that, he actually pops up more than you'd expect him to. And yeah, so that's why I have him at number 29. And at number 28, I have Scottie Pippen. The reason why I have Scottie Pippen here, a lot of people would not agree with me. A lot of people are going to say, he's not a top 30 player of all time. He's not even a top 50 player of all time. That's not true, though. He is easily number 28, and he's the greatest sidekick ever. By far, it's not even close. Unless you count Kobe Bryant as a sidekick to Shaquille O'Neal, but no, he's not. He wasn't a sidekick. They were partners. Scottie Pippen was a less good version of LeBron James. He was a point forward who could do everything pretty much. He was a phenomenal player. If you look at Michael Jordan's stats without him, it's actually insane. Michael Jordan, who a lot of people consider to be the GOAT, and you'll see if I consider him to be the GOAT at the end, doesn't even have a close to as good record in anything without Scottie Pippen. His playoff record is 1-9 in series or something like that. He has a barely above 500 games record without Scottie Pippen. He's never even made it past the second round without Scottie Pippen. He's not Michael Jordan without Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen is a great player, and I think he definitely deserves to be in the top 30. So moving on from him, I got Isaiah Thomas at number 20. Not Isaiah Thomas. I got John Stockton at number 27. Sorry about that. So the reason why I have John Stockton here, I have him here for a few reasons. One of them being he leads the NBA in assists and steals all time. He was another great sidekick in NBA history to Karl Malone. And he could run the floor greater than almost anybody else could in the 90s. If you look at an average point guard in the 90s and then look at him, you can tell the difference, the way he plays, how he would pass the ball. He would just do it all, basically. And, he could pass very well, which I just mentioned. He stole the ball a lot, and you might be saying, I've never heard of John Stockton to be a steal the ball player. Well, guess what? He leads the NBA all time in steals. So yeah, he actually did. And you can't say that he had, who was his, the person on that team that led them was Karl Malone. So he was throwing out assists to Karl Malone and Byron Russell and was able to get the most assists ever versus someone who was playing with LeBron James or Michael Jordan. getting the most assists ever. So yeah, he had a lot of talent, and he definitely deserves to be in the top 30, and that's why I have him at number 27. So moving on from him, I got Kawhi Leonard at number 26. Now, I have Kawhi here for a few reasons. First of all, he is a great defensive player. He can play walk down on anybody, like anybody. We've seen him literally block a shot with one finger. He is a great and phenomenal defensive player. And then going back to the offensive side, we've seen him average 30 in playoff series and I believe in regular seasons too before. He led the Spurs to a chip back in 2014 and then did it again with the Raptors in 2019. And so far, he hasn't gotten much accomplished with the Clippers, but we'll see how that goes. Right now, he's tangled up in a little situation with Steve Ballmer and another company. But, you know, he is a great player on both ends of the floor. He's just phenomenal. And, yeah, that's why I have him at number 26. So those were my first 5 players, and that's my first 5. Yeah, so let's move on to the second 5. So at number 25, I have Isaiah Thomas. At number 24, I have Elgin Baylor. At number 23, I got Charles Barkley. At number 22, I got Giannis Antetokounmpo. And at number 21, I got David Robinson. David Robinson. So I'll go just again from top to bottom, and I'll explain why I put each player where they are. So Isaiah Thomas. I put Isaiah Thomas where he is because he led the Bad Boy Pistons. The Bad Boy Pistons is like Showtime Lakers, or it's like, you know, LeBron's Heat. It's just another team that was doing amazing for the years that they were in their prime, and he led that team. You know, he's one of the best point guards of all time. I probably would have him on my Mount Rushmore of point guards, and like, he could just do everything so well. He has one of the best handles of all time. Maybe not the best, but one of the best. He could lead a team. Like, we saw him. He had who else was on that team? Bill Laimbeer, like early Dennis Rodman, young Dennis Rodman. He had to lead those players, and he led them to back-to-back championships. And I think he's one of the best point guards of all time. And yeah, that's why I have him there. So Isaiah Thomas is number 25. So moving on from him, I got Elgin Baylor at number 24. So I put him at number 24 for like just one reason, basically. I respect my elders. He's one of the greatest players of all time. Back then, he was like up there. If you actually look at his stats, it's actually pretty crazy. I saw some of his stats, and I was like, how have I never seen these before? And he's actually everywhere. Like, there was a few years when Bill Russell won the MVP, or like Wilt Chamberlain or whatever won the MVP over him. But if you look at the stats, he was literally like, you know, only averaging 5 points less, maybe even more assists and a similar amount of rebounds. Like, he had seasons where he was averaging 35 or 30. Like, he was a good player. And, you know, you might not be able to watch footage of him, but if you look at the stats, the box scores of just an average night for him, you'd be thinking of like, you know, prime Russell Westbrook or something like that in terms of how the stats looked. But yeah, moving on from him, I got Charles Barkley at number 23. So, you know, there's a few things that Charles Barkley had a hard time with. You know, he had a hard time shooting the ball. He had a hard time with, like, you know, he gained a lot of weight a lot, so he was a heavy player. But like, there's reasons why he was also good. He led a Suns team that, besides him, their best player was Dan Marley, and he led them to the finals in 1993. And if Michael Jordan wasn't there, he would probably win those finals. And he was one of the, you know, greatest power forwards of all time. There's a lot of power forwards on this list going down from him in the like 10s, 20s, whatever. But he is one of the greatest power forwards of all time. He could play good defense, and he could get to the hoop on offense. Maybe not how you're thinking. Maybe not like a Derrick Rose, you know, get to the hoop, reverse layup type of thing. But he could get to the hoop, back down people, get good shots off. He could do all that. He's a good player, and yeah, I think that he definitely deserves to be in the top 25. and I think he definitely deserves to be number 23. Yeah. So at number 22, I got Giannis Antetokounmpo. So it's, of course, he's in your top 30. He should be in everyone's top 30. He's literally proven to be one of the best power forwards of all time. He has one of the best bodies in NBA history. He's like a smaller version of Shaq, but like he won Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, Finals MVP, all in the same season, I believe. Or maybe, yeah, I believe that was on the same season. But he is a great defensive player. I'm pretty sure he's led the NBA in blocks a few times. You know, he's a very fast player considering he's a power forward. You'd see his body, and even his body doesn't look like it belonged to a fast person, but he's fast. He's athletic. He's crazy athletic. And, yeah, he's a great offensive player, and I think he definitely deserves to be in the top 25. And a lot of people would even rank him, you know, lower than that or higher than that and, like, have him at, like, 15 or 16 even. And, you know, I wouldn't even be mad at that if he was higher than 22. So I think he's one of the greatest offensive defensive players of all time in terms of how he could be so good at both at the same time. And yeah, I think he definitely deserves to be there. So moving on from him, I got David Robinson at number 21. I called him David Robertson earlier. Anyway, so David Robinson is, you know, one of the greatest centers of all time for sure. He's like, when you look at the greatest centers of all time, he's the first player off the list because you're thinking of like Shaq, Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Hakeem Olajuwon, and then he's like the first player that you don't think of. He's the greatest player that you're not thinking of. But he is a phenomenal player overall. He definitely deserves to be here at number 21. He got drafted in 1987. On 1992, he was on the Dream Team already. He was like only in his 5th season. He was on, you know, he was on the team that was the greatest team ever developed. And he was only 5 years in, so you have to be really good to be like that. He was great on defense, just like Giannis. He's just like Giannis in terms of how he can be good at defense and offense at the same time. But then he would be good at defense, you know, getting 2-3 blocks a game. But then he'd be right back at offense, you know, scoring 25 points a game. And, you know, getting 10 rebounds. So he could do it all. And, you know, I think he's a great player and that he definitely deserves to be here. So that's my second 5 of the day. And yeah, so now we're going to move on to the third 5, which is number 16 through 20. So at number 20, I got Kevin Garnett. At number 19, I got Moses Malone. At number 18, I got Dirk Nowitzki. At number 17, I got Julius Erving. And at number 16, I got Karl Malone. So the reason why I put these people at these numbers, I'll explain in a second. But, like, you'll understand. There's good explanations behind this. So starting off with Kevin Garnett, he's for sure one of the greatest power forwards of all time. A lot of people would call him the second greatest power forward of all time. On my list, I'd put him closer to third. But, you know, he's a great player. Another player who could do both offense and defense. You know, a lot of these players who would be great at offense and defense are in this range of, like, you know, 18, 19, 20, in this range of how good they are. And so, yeah, you'll be hearing me say they're good at offense and defense a lot in this part of the video. But he was a great, you know, he led a team to the finals and won the finals. Remember that. And how many times did he go to the finals with the Celtics? I forget. But, like, he led a team with a big 3 of Paul Pierce and Ray Allen. And, you know, that he did have good help because Paul Pierce and Ray Allen are great players. But he still led them. He was the main person on that team. And, you know, even before that, when he was on the Timberwolves, he was still averaging 20 points a game. He won MVPs, or one MVP. I forget how many MVPs he won, but he won an MVP or more. He was just a great player in his career. And, you know, I think he definitely deserves to be at number 20. So, at number 19 now, I got Moses Malone. And, you know, I put him here for a few reasons. The main reason being he was a beast, pretty much. You know, he was he's probably the most untalked about player who's actually like a top 20 player ever. If I tell you everybody who's on my top 20 right now, you see that he's probably the most untalked about player. He is like, he played back in the 70s, the 80s, and whatever, and he played for a good team. Well, now they're not a good team, but at that time they were a great team, and he was just an anchor, and he was one of the greatest centers of all time again. But I think he definitely deserves to be here. And even if you just look at the stats, it's like another thing, just like with Elgin Baylor, you wouldn't expect him to have the stats. You'd be like, why isn't he talked about like Michael Jordan then? Like, I didn't think that stats like this were like possible, and then this player goes on pretty much untalked about. I didn't like to be untalked about like he is. I'd expect him to average like 6 points a game or something, but no, he averaged a lot. And he was also great on defense. Another player who was great on offense and defense. And I think that's why I put him there, and I think that he just deserves to be there overall. But yeah. So moving on from him, I got Dirk Nowitzki at number 18. So he's one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. He led that 2011 team to the hardest championship ever. I'll take you through the route. First, he had to beat Brandon Roy and the Portland Trail Blazers, which is like a good team. Maybe that was probably the easiest team on the route to the finals, but it was still a hard team to beat. Then he had Kobe Bryant and Pau Gasol's Lakers. They were literally the defending champions for 2 years now. They won the championship the past 2 years. The Mavs did not only beat them, they swept them in 4 games. Then he had the baby Oklahoma City Thunder. So mini Russ, mini KD, mini James Harden when they were all young. And yeah, beat them too. And then he went to the finals where he was sick in the finals. So he missed out, I believe, on like a game or two. But then he beat the big three of Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James. And he beat them in the finals in 6 games. And yeah, they won the finals. So he has one of the greatest routes, or one of the hardest routes to NBA history, to NBA Finals ever, and won it. And so that's just one of the reasons I have him here. But otherwise, from that, he was a underrated player in my opinion. He could shoot the ball very well. Like at that time, there were not a lot of shooting big men. In the 2010s, I'd say, how many big men were shooting the ball? Not a lot. Now you have Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, even like players who are like centers who are like not even as good as Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, like Nikola Vucevic, Brook Lopez. They still shoot the ball a lot. So it's like back then though, that was not like in the 2010s. That was not like a big thing to shoot the ball and be a big man. And yeah, he was one of the only players who could do that, and he was very talented for it. And I think he's just a great player, and that's why I have him here. But moving on from him, I got Julius Erving at number 17. So he's like, Julius Erving probably has the most popular, maybe not the most popular, but one of the most popular plays in NBA history. That reversal layup against the Lakers. But he's just a great player and definitely deserves to be here without a doubt. I never like really thought about Julius Erving as a great player before, but like not too long ago, I saw a video where it's like someone had him in their top 6 players of all time, and I was like, that's outrageous. How'd you have him above Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, and all these other players? And then they showed me they showed me clips of him, stats of him, and like I just noticed he's actually a phenomenal player. Like I would have him in my top 30 before, but even lower in the list, and I didn't notice how good he was. I just had him there because paying respect to my elders and whatever. But he's actually a great and phenomenal player, and he definitely deserves to be here. And so yeah, that's why I have him here. He's just great on both ends of the floor. He was a fast player. He could even shoot the ball a little bit. And yeah, he just like he was Michael Jordan's idol. So he's just a great player, and if you were like a kid growing up back then, he was like the player to watch, the player to be like. But yeah, so moving on from him, we got the last player in the third row of 5, I believe. Third, yeah. we got Karl Malone. So I have Karl Malone on here for a few reasons. First of all, he led a team to the finals like two years in a row. You know, the Jazz went to the finals in 1997 and 1998. Both times they lost to the Bulls. But who is that team led by? Karl Malone. Karl Malone also has MVPs. I bet you didn't know that, but he actually won MVPs over Jordan in some of those years. And yeah, he's actually just a great player overall. You know, he was second on the all-time scoring list for a long time, and now he's third. But that's still really high up. He has more all-time career points than Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, all these like big names, and he has more all-time points than them. And yeah, he's a great player. He definitely deserves to be here, and just no question, no doubt about it. He's one of the greatest players of all time. So yeah, that's why I have him there. And now we're going to move on to the fourth row of 5 people, and it's going to be from 15 to 11. So at 15, I got Oscar Robertson. At 14, I got Jerry West. At 13, I got Kevin Durant. At 12, I got Bill Russell. And at 11, I got Hakeem Olajuwon. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Oscar Robertson right now. If you watch prime Russell Westbrook, then Oscar Robertson is just basically the back then version of that. He's literally like prime Russell Westbrook, but for his whole career, he did not get. Imagine if Russell Westbrook stayed how he was in 2017 for his whole career. From like, let's say he's obviously when you're in your first year or two, you're not as good as your prime because you're still growing then. But like, imagine Russell Westbrook got drafted in like 2008 or something. Let's say by 2011, Russell Westbrook was 2017 Russell Westbrook, and he was like that for pretty much almost the rest of his career. That's Oscar Robertson. Oscar Robertson had the most triple-doubles in a season until Russell Westbrook broke his record. But he, like, if you look at his stats, it's another inflamed stat lines that you will see, because like if you just look at an average night, you could just search up any game, and chances are that game he probably would have had a triple-double, and he probably would have had like 30 points, 15 assists, and like 10 rebounds, which is a good triple-double. So, you know, that's why I put him at 15. He's definitely one of the most underrated players of all time, and he definitely deserves to be here without a doubt. But at number 14, I got Jerry West. He basically, I'm going to tell you a kind of sad story about Jerry West. He went to the finals about 8 times before he finally won it. So he won it in like 1972, I think, or 1971. But he went to the finals like 8 times or 9 times before he could finally win it. And, you know, it's just but you realize, don't say that like, oh, but you didn't win the finals. You made it to the finals like 9 or 10 times, but you didn't win it almost every single time. So you're not a good player. No, he made it to the finals. You know how hard it is? I bet you can't make it to the finals 9 or 10 times. He made it to the finals. That's a great accomplishment. He did it 9 or 10 times in his career, which is insane. So he's definitely a untalked about player who should be talked about a lot. You know, people talk about him. He's the logo, but like, he's a great player. And people say that like the Lakers he only finally was able to win the finals once he got Wilt Chamberlain, but that's not true. If you actually, I looked at the game against the Knicks that they played in the finals in like 1972. He actually led the team. Wilt Chamberlain did not lead the team. That was already past Wilt Chamberlain's prime, I guess you could say. But like Wilt Chamberlain is pretty much in his prime for almost his entire career. But he was already like, you know, not as good by that time. But Jerry West basically led the team, and he's a great player, and he definitely deserves to be here as a top 15 player of all time. And yeah, he's the logo, so how can you not put him there? So anyway, moving on from him, I got Kevin Durant at 13. So Kevin Durant, in my opinion, is probably the greatest scorer of all time. He is one of the best bodies in NBA history, you know, probably behind like Shaq and Giannis or something. But like, when you're like almost 7 foot or however tall he is, and you're just lanky and you can shoot the ball, who's guarding you? You could get the best defender to ever live, and he would have a hard time guarding Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant is going to drop 28 or 30 points on you no matter what, no matter who's guarding him. He's probably the greatest scorer of all time, in my opinion. I think he's the greatest scorer of all time. He can shoot over anybody. No one can block him. besides Russell Westbrook. No one can block him though, pretty much. He has good handles and he's a fast player. He's just for sure one of the greatest players of all time. And like, for me, it's no question to have him here because when you're the greatest scorer, no matter if you suck at defense and no matter if all your other attributes are bad, if you're the greatest scorer of all time, you have to be up there with the greatest players of all time. So, yeah, that's why I have Kevin Durant there. I think he's for sure one of the greatest players of all time. And yeah, so moving on from him, I got number 12, which is Bill Russell. So Bill Russell has won. I'm gonna just tell you the reason why I put him here. He's won 11 rings in his career. First of all, second of all, he's just like people say. No, duh, he won 11 rings. He played in the Plumbers era. But like, here's the thing: if you actually look at the NBA, I'm just gonna be honest. That wasn't the Plumbers era. Yeah, there may have been a few people who weren't great, and they were probably like 5'10" white dudes who were just trying to make $25 per game, or however much they made. But like in reality, the real Plumbers era, in my opinion, was like the late 1970s, I'd say. Because like, do you even know who made it to the finals in the 1970s? In the late 1970s? No. The Washington Bullets at that time were like the best team in the NBA. And in that 1978, in those 1970s, like late 1970s, could you even name one player on that Washington Bullets team besides like Wes Unseld and whatever? No, probably not. So my point is that Bill Russell, those rings were hard to get. He had Wilt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, who else was in the league at that time? Elgin Baylor, all these great players. All of those players I've already mentioned in the top 30, am gonna mention, spoiler alert. But he's a great player, and for sure, he didn't win those rings easily. Those rings were hard to win. If they were easy to win, then why didn't Wilt Chamberlain have 11 rings? So Bill Russell was also a great defensive player. Like, people don't know this a lot, but he was actually if defensive player of the year was a thing back then, he would have won it because he was like a block machine, first of all, and second of all, even if you look at some clips, like I looked at clips, he was just great in like thinking about the plays that he would do, the way he would move to help recover and everything. He's just a great and untalked about defensive player, in my opinion. So yeah, that's why I have him there. And so moving on from him, I got Hakeem Olajuwon at number 11. So Hakeem Olajuwon is just outside of my top 10 because the top 10 players are like all GOATs. And all people can be GOATs in other people's eyes. But Hakeem Olajuwon, he was drafted in the same year as Michael Jordan. So yeah, obviously it's probably hard for him to be talked about a lot because he was having to put up with like the greatest player of all time. Spoiler alert. But yeah, he couldn't win Rookie of the Year because Michael Jordan was there. Even though he did get picked first overall, but throughout his career, he basically played at the same time and everything that Michael Jordan. And the only times he could win rings was when Michael Jordan was not in the league. But he won rings. That's a hard thing to do. There was other people who were good back then who he had to go through to win those rings. He won 2 back-to-back rings, and just the one thing that stands out to me is that Shaquille O'Neal said that he was like one of the greatest players he ever played. Shaquille O'Neal said that. And so when that comes from a player who's played Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and a bunch of other people, I think that it's definitely true, and that, for sure, Hakeem Olajuwon is one of the best players ever. He had the dream shake. He was good on defense too. He won Defensive Player of the Year. A lot of people argue that 1994 season or 1995 season, I forget which one, was the greatest season ever by one person because he won MVP, Rookie of the Year, MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, Finals MVP, and he was third in scoring, I believe, that year. So yeah, he is like a great player. and he definitely deserved to be where he was. So yeah, but moving on from him, we're gonna go to the next 5. So this is already inside the top 10, so things are gonna get exciting because I'm gonna talk about these players a little bit more. I'm gonna talk about I'm gonna explain why I put them there a little bit more versus just like, a quick intro. But okay, so at number 10, I got Wilt Chamberlain. At number 9, I got Tim Duncan. At number 8, I got Larry Bird. Sorry. At number 7, I got Shaquille O'Neal. And at number 6, I got Stephen Curry. So I'm just gonna go in order. So we wait till the end to see why I put those players there. But so the reason why I put Wilt Chamberlain at number 10 was because I'm like, even though I don't think that the 60s was the real Plumbers era, it was still probably easier competition overall than current day in 1990s and all the other decades. But still, it was hard, and that's why I have him at 10 and not 6 or 7 or anything like that. But he's a great player, and he scored 100 points in a game. He was averaging 50 points per game, and yeah, he was doing it over people who were my height or 5'8" or something. But still, that's tough to do. And no matter who it's over, to do that in a 48-minute game, it's tough. So yeah, that's why I have him there. But moving on from him, I got Tim Duncan. So in my opinion, Tim Duncan's the greatest power forward of all time, without a question. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that's also a lot of other people's opinions. But he was just a great player all around. I'll tell you the story in a second, but he was a great defensive player and a great offensive player. He could do everything, and he was just underrated. But anyway, so this story is that in 2002, I think, one of those years, 2003, 2004, they played a game. I forget who it was against, but he was so close to having a quintuple double or something. At the end, his stat line was 25 points, 10 rebounds, 10 assists, 8 blocks, and 7 steals. And here's the thing: two blocks. He had 8 blocks in that game, which is crazy. But two of those blocks were given to David Robinson that should have actually been given to him. And same thing with the steals. He should have had 4 or 5 even extra steals that game given to him. He would have been the first player ever to have a quintuple double if the scorekeepers got it right, which is crazy. So yeah, he was a great player, and in my opinion, 1000% deserves to be in the top 10. And yeah, he's in my top 9, so that's why I have him at 9. But moving on from him, I got number 8, which is Larry Bird. So Larry Bird, great player, great shooter, great defensive player, and he could just do it. He could just do it. That's why I have him here. Pretty much, he was one of the greatest shooters of all time. People don't know that. People are like, Larry Bird, greatest shooter of all time. What? No, Stephen Curry is the greatest shooter of all time. But Larry Bird is probably a top 4 or 5 shooter of all time, and people don't know that. But he was actually the Stephen Curry of back then. And he's just a great player who could definitely do pretty much everything. And yeah, that's why I have him here. But so moving on from him, I got Shaquille O'Neal. So Shaquille O'Neal, I have him here for a few reasons, pretty obvious reasons. Most dominant player ever, one of the greatest defensive players ever. I'm just gonna say it, he's one of the greatest defensive players ever, one of the greatest offensive players ever. He's literally almost the dream player, the perfect player. He has 4 rings. 3 of them he had with Kobe Bryant in the 2000s, 1 Finals MVP all of those years. Kobe Bryant wasn't his sidekick. They were more closer to partners, I'd say, than sidekick. But still, he led that team. And then he won another trip with Dwayne Wade in 2006. Again, it was sort of Dwayne Wade, they were kind of like partners, because Shaquille O'Neal was a little bit like older at that time. Dwayne Wade was still only in his like 3rd year, so he was younger. But I can't just immediately say it was like they were like more partners. And I think Dwayne Wade may have won Finals MVP in 06, but still they were like Shaquille O'Neal was one of the greatest players of all time for sure. To me, it's no question. And so yeah, that's why I have him at 7, and he's just phenomenal everywhere. He could break backboards. He could do almost everything except shoot the ball. But yeah, so that's why I have him there. And then at number 6, I have the greatest shooter of all time. Not even a question. That's pretty much the only reason he's here, because if Stephen Curry couldn't shoot, then Stephen Curry would probably be one of the worst players in NBA history. Because like that's why, if he had an average attribute for like everything else, then he would probably be like a top 2 or 3 greatest player of all time, because he's the greatest shooter by far. No, like people have a debate for who's the GOAT, who's the greatest defensive player of all time. Does anybody have a debate for who's the greatest shooter of all time? No, it's Stephen Curry. Not even a question. Who on planet Earth thinks that the greatest shooter of all time is not Stephen Curry? Anyway, if pretty much, let's say both. If he couldn't shoot, he'd probably be one of the worst NBA players of all time. But if his other attributes were like average, like if he could, if he had the body of like a 6'6" player, average player, and if he could play defense like an average player, so nothing special, but still just average, then he would probably no doubt be like a top 2 greatest player of all time, maybe even top 1. So, he's a great player. In terms of offensively, probably one of the best offensive players of all time, maybe even the best. He can shoot the ball crazy, obviously. So yeah, that's why I have him there. And then moving on to the final one, the top 5 greatest players of all time, in my opinion. I'm gonna list them off to you. So at number 5, I have Magic Johnson. At number 4, I got Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. At number 3, I got Kobe Bryant. At number 2, I got LeBron James. And at number 1, I got Michael Jordan. So I'm going to, again, go in order, so you'll have to wait for the last players that I mentioned. So I have Magic Johnson at number 5 for just, like, a few reasons. First of all, he's pretty much a less good version of LeBron James. Now, don't get me wrong, he's still an amazing, amazing player, but he's literally exactly the same thing that LeBron James is, just not as 100% good. But like literally passing, rebounds, scoring, he could do it all. And he's a 6'9" player who back then, being able to pass, rebound, and score, he was like pretty much the only player who could do all 3 things and be like an expert at all 3 things. And he's just a phenomenal player, without a doubt. And I think he 100% sure needs to be in my top 5 players, because what Showtime Lakers, they probably don't win any rings without him. All that stuff never happens without Magic Johnson. One of the greatest rivalries in NBA history between the Celtics and Lakers doesn't happen if Magic Johnson's not there. That started with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. What if Magic Johnson was there? Then that rivalry doesn't happen. But he's a great player, and he definitely deserves to be on my top 5 list for sure. And yeah, so moving on from him, I got number 4, the Skyhook, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He is, in my opinion, the greatest center of all time. He could do pretty much everything pretty much. He's a great defensive player. He could, but he could also at the same time of being a great defensive player, he could be a great offensive player. So that's hard to do. And how I mentioned a lot of people when I was in my early 20s, late 18, 19, I said we're great offensive players and defensive players. He's not a great offensive player and defensive player. He's a phenomenal offensive player and defensive player. He didn't create it, but he mastered a shot that pretty much, if people were using the skyhook in today's NBA, people should be using it because it's pretty much unguardable. How are you going to block it? If I'm like coming in like this, how are you going to block that? You can't. It's not possible. And he mastered a shot that was really hard to master, and then he became one of the greatest players ever. You know, he won a ring with the Bucks back in the 70s, like in 1971, I believe, or 1970, and then he won rings with the Lakers later on. And he was just an amazing player, and in my opinion, definitely deserves to be in the top 4 players of all time. So moving on from him, I got number 3, which is Kobe Bryant. Now, some people say Kobe Bryant's the GOAT. Other people put him where I'm putting him right now, but a lot of people also put him at like 9 or 10. To me, I think he's number 3. He is literally a less good version of Michael Jordan. He's still great, just like, you know, Magic Johnson, LeBron. Magic Johnson's still great. Kobe Bryant's still great, but like, he literally copied Michael Jordan's every single move in terms of on the court. Like, you cannot get closer to Michael Jordan than he was, and Michael Jordan is, in my opinion, the GOAT. And when you have that, like, I think it's so hard to copy and master down all of that stuff. And then, you know, he won 3 rings early on with Shaq. Didn't get finals MVP, but then that's okay, because then in the late 2000s, 2009, 2010, whatever years he won it, he won back-to-back rings with the Lakers. And yeah, then he didn't have Shaq. Then he had Paul Gasol. He led Paul Gasol and Lamar Odom to a championship. Like, Paul Gasol's a great player, don't get me wrong, but, you know, he's no Shaquille O'Neal. He's no Scottie Pippen. So I think he's 100% a great player and a top 3 greatest player of all time. Some people, I know a lot of people who say Kobe Bryant's the GOAT, and I know a lot of people who say he barely makes my top 10. I think for me, he's like in the middle of GOAT and out, like at the end of top 10, which is around 3. But you know, I think that he's a phenomenal player and definitely deserves to be at number 3. So for number 2 and number 1, I'm going to talk about it at the same time because there's a lot of controversy here. Michael Jordan, LeBron James. In my opinion, Michael Jordan's the GOAT. In my opinion, LeBron James is the second greatest player of all time. So if you're like a LeBron fan, then you're probably saying, but LeBron James has more all-time points. Yeah, but who averaged more points a game? Michael Jordan averaged 30 points a game across his career, including the old years when he played on the Wizards. He averaged 30 points per game, and LeBron James averaged 26 points a game. But then you're going to be like, okay, but LeBron James also got rebounds and assists. Michael Jordan didn't do that. Actually, Michael Jordan was like literally considered to be the back then version of like LeBron James, pretty much, because he averaged like 5 assists and 5 rebounds, or 6 assists and 6 rebounds across his career, which is good. And in the 1989 season or 1990 season, I forget which one it was, one of those seasons, he played point guard for the Chicago Bulls, and he averaged 10 assists per game and 11 rebounds per game in that season. Or no, like 9 rebounds per game. 10 assists and 9 rebounds per game in that season. He was like 1 rebound off from averaging a triple-double, which LeBron has never done. Just saying. So, he's the greatest player of all time, in my opinion. LeBron James is a great and phenomenal player. You know, and LeBron James also has a longevity. Michael Jordan, a lot of people don't know this, but like Michael Jordan also had a longevity. People are saying, but he retired early, but he actually also played years on the Wizards, and people say, but he sucked when he played on the Wizards. No, he was still averaging 25 points a game on the Wizards. LeBron James on the Lakers averages like 20 points per game. Michael Jordan on the Wizards averaged 25 points a game. So Michael Jordan also has longevity too. And maybe LeBron's longevity is better because LeBron could sustain where he was. Michael Jordan was even at a higher level, but then just got down to the same level as LeBron towards the end of his career. But both players are phenomenal players. But in my opinion, one is undoubtedly, like without a doubt, the GOAT. And you know, when I see Michael Jordan, I just think, it's just in my opinion, he's the GOAT. And in my opinion, LeBron James is a great player, but just second greatest player of all time. You know, he's the all-time leading in points. He's won, and then in terms of rebounds and assists, He's like top 10, I believe, or something like that in both categories all time. So yeah, he's a great player, but I just think that Michael Jordan takes the cake for who's better in terms of that. But both players are still phenomenal players without a doubt. And, you know, I think that both players could easily be able to, you know, call themselves whatever they want, because if someone comes up to me and says LeBron James is a GOAT, they could go on for just as long as I'm going on right now, giving reasons why they think LeBron is the GOAT. And, you know, I would disagree with them, but I wouldn't even be that mad because LeBron is still a great player. But, you know, you could give your arguments for him. Another reason why I think Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time is because Michael Jordan was the face of the NBA back in the 1990s. LeBron James is the face of the NBA right now. I just want to quickly put this out there. When was the NBA more popular? Back in the 1990s or right now? Back in the 1990s, the NBA was at a good level. It was good, but now the NBA is falling off. And if we look at who's the face of today's NBA, it's LeBron. Who was the face of back then? It was Michael Jordan. So it's just another reason why I think Michael Jordan is better. But yeah. So that's about it. And that's it on today's episode for Triple Ball Breakdown. And I guess I'll see you guys next time.